In the autumn of 492 BC, the most powerful empire on Earth sent its navy to punish a collection of small, fractious city-states on the western edge of civilization. The Persians had every reason to believe this would be straightforward. They had ships, soldiers, supplies, and the momentum of an empire that had never truly been stopped. What they did not have was any understanding of what waited for them at a narrow, rocky peninsula jutting into the northern Aegean Sea. What happened there would not just end one campaign. It would set the stage for a decade of conflict that would define the ancient world. To understand why Darius I launched this expedition at all, you have to go back roughly a decade. In 499 BC, the Greek cities of Ionia, situated on the western coast of modern-day Turkey, then part of the Persian Empire, rose in open revolt. They were tired of Persian-appointed tyrants ruling over them, tired of paying tribute to a king they had never chosen. The revolt was serious enough that Athens and the city of Eretria sent ships across the Aegean to support it. Persian forces were pushed back, the regional capital of Sardis was burned, the revolt was eventually crushed. But Darius never forgot that Athens and Eretria had crossed the water to help his subjects defy him. To a king who ruled from Egypt to Central Asia, from the Black Sea to the Persian Gulf, this was not a minor border skirmish. It was an affront that demanded a response. So in 492 BC, Darius dispatched a force under his son-in-law Mardonius. This was a man of genuine ability, not simply a political appointment, but a commander who had already campaigned successfully in Thrace and Macedonia. The mission was layered: reassert Persian dominance in Thrace, bring Macedonia firmly under control, and then move south to punish the Greek mainland. The fleet was enormous by the standards of the ancient world, numbering in the hundreds of ships and carrying a land army alongside it. The campaign began promisingly. Mardonius moved through Thrace without significant opposition. He consolidated Persian authority over Macedonia, whose king, Amyntas II, had already submitted to Persian power years before. The machine was working exactly as designed. Greece lay ahead, undefended, and apparently within reach. Then they reached Mount Athos. This peninsula deserves more attention than history typically gives it. Mount Athos is the easternmost of three fingers of land that extend south from the Chalcidice region of northern Greece into the Aegean. The peninsula is narrow, mountainous, and dramatic. The mountain itself rises to nearly 2,000 meters directly from the sea. Sailors in the ancient world knew this stretch of coastline well enough to fear it. The waters around the southern tip of Athos are notorious for sudden, violent weather changes. The geography itself channels winds in unpredictable ways, compressing and accelerating them as they move around the mass of the mountain. There are no natural harbors to shelter in. The rocks at the waterline are exposed and merciless. The Persian fleet was sailing along this coastline when a storm broke over them. Ancient sources differ slightly on the details, but the general account is consistent. The historian Herodotus, writing decades later with access to survivors and their descendants, describes a storm of exceptional violence. The wind came from the north, striking the fleet as it moved around the Athos headland. The ships were caught in open water with no room to maneuver and nowhere to run. The coastline that was supposed to be their guide became a wall of destruction. Ships were driven onto rocks. Others were swamped in open water. The carnage was swift and total. Herodotus gives a figure of around 300 ships lost and over 20,000 men dead. Modern historians debate these exact numbers. Ancient sources tend toward the dramatic, but even if the real toll was significantly lower, the military consequences were catastrophic. The fleet was functionally destroyed as an offensive force. Without the fleet to support it and supply it, the land army could not continue south. Mardonius had no real choice. He ordered the campaign abandoned and withdrew. The scale of the loss is worth sitting with for a moment. 20,000 was roughly the population of a significant Greek city. These were not just sailors. They were soldiers, craftsmen, engineers, and translators. The human infrastructure of a military expedition. The horses that had been loaded onto transport ships, the weapons, the grain supplies, the diplomatic gifts meant for Greek cities being asked to submit. All of it gone, either at the bottom of the Aegean or scattered across the rocks of Mount Athos. Back in Persia, the news of what had happened landed heavily. Darius was a king who understood the relationship between military success and political authority. An empire that large was held together partly by force and partly by the perception of inevitability, the sense that resisting Persia was ultimately futile. A fleet of 300 ships destroyed by weather without a single enemy arrow fired was not the image the empire needed to project. But here is what makes this moment genuinely significant, rather than just a dramatic footnote. Darius did not accept this outcome as the end of the question. He spent the following years rebuilding his forces and planning a second attempt. When he died in 486 BC, still preparing, the project passed to his son Xerxes. Xerxes, determined not to repeat the disaster at Athos, made one of the most extraordinary engineering decisions of the ancient world. He ordered a canal cut straight across the base of the Athos peninsula, wide enough for 2 triremes to pass side by side. Thousands of workers labored for 3 years on it. Xerxes was not going to let geography humiliate him the way it had his father. That second expedition, launched in 480 BC, produced Thermopylae, Salamis, and Plataea, battles that would become the foundational myths of Western civilization. The storm of 492 BC did not prevent the Persian Wars. It shaped them. It determined their scale, their timing, and the particular form of Persian obsession that drove Xerxes to move an army of hundreds of thousands across a bridge of boats strapped together across the Hellespont. The fleet that vanished at Mount Athos is easy to reduce to a number: 300 ships, 20,000 men. But it is more useful to think of it as a forcing function. It forced Persia to return with something larger and more determined. It gave Greece nearly a decade to watch what was coming and make what preparations it could. It gave Themistocles time to persuade Athens to build its navy. It set the conditions under which a small fleet at Salamis would one day break the greatest empire of the ancient world. The sea stopped Darius at Athos, but in stopping him, it did not end the story. It only made the next chapter inevitable.